Ladies and gents, thank you so much for coming. What a delight to have you all here on this special event which sees a symbiotic connection between the Peer Gallery and the extraordinary exhibition going on at the moment, led wonderfully by Stephen Watts and others, Swirl of Words, Swirl of Worlds, and the European Poetry Festival. This is the third event in our current programme happening across this month, celebrating primarily European poets who are based in the UK, because we can't really get any European poets from abroad in at the moment. Tonight what you'll see, after an opening reading and description of the Swirl of Words, Swirl of Worlds project by Stephen Watts, is 4 brand new collaborations made for the night. So these are collaborations that I've had the pleasure to curate, pairing poets who perhaps have never met before to write or create performances that are premiered this evening. Following Stephen, there will be a reading from Karenjit Sandhu and myself, Kristina Kuneva and Susie Campbell, and then Vanni Bianconi, represented because he's self-isolating and can't be here tonight, by Simone Spoladore and Fabian Peake to finish. Thanks again for coming. I'm sorry it's slightly rainy. It's lovely that we can share this with you all here in such a beautiful setting. It's my pleasure to introduce first Stephen Watts.
Thanks, Steve. And thank you all for coming today. It's actually lovely to see people sat around and spread out like that. And also it's great to be doing this as part of Stephen's Festival, which he puts on so superbly every year, possibly sometimes twice a year, or more than that even. This book, which incidentally is on that table there, and there don't need to be any copies left by the end of the evening, and it is free, was put together in the course of 12 months, really. March 2020, we weren't really considering doing a book for the exhibition, which is in the library and at Peer Gallery. And then when lockdown happened and the exhibition got postponed and had a lid put on it and postponed again and what so forth, one of us, and I don't know who was foolish enough to suggest it, said, well, look, why don't we do a book of poetry of the languages spoken in Hackney? And that's what this book is. And it was an enormous pleasure and an enormous pressure to do it. But to gather poems from around the world in languages spoken in a London borough that's close to my heart. In my own borough I live in is Tower Hamlets, where there's a very similar range of languages, was very moving for me. One of the things I know that matters a lot to Stephen, and it's in the structure of this festival, is giving platforms, enabling poets who are living in this country but whose language is not English, poets writing in languages from outside England, in other words, a totally anti-Brexit stance and action, to give fantastic support. I want to read 2 poems in particular by 2 poets. One is a German poet who was born in Vienna in 1915, Stella Rotenberg, and she managed to leave Vienna in the 30s. She was Jewish. She managed to leave. She lived almost the rest of the next nearly 80 years of her life in Leeds, writing extraordinary poetry but remaining pretty much unknown, certainly to British poets. And that's something that wouldn't happen now, largely because of things that people like Steve does, bringing poets together. We included 2 short poems of hers, and again I want to read these because they sort of say such different things. First one, Der Mensch, human beings. Human beings hate their rivals, their adversaries, their subjugators, their oppressors, their inquisitors, their jailers. But most of all, human beings, being human, hate their victims. And then a second poem, and please note the all-encompassing contrast. Bitte, plea. Pray grant me the strength to want to take notice of everything in life and the wish to treat all living things gently. Next poet I'm going to read is a Czech poet, Ivan Blatney, who also came to this country about the same age as Stella Rotenberg, but in 1948. And lived much of the last 30 years of his life. He died in 1991 in asylums and mental hospitals and care homes in Ipswich and Essex. For about 10 years when he was writing poetry, and he said to his doctors and nurses, "I'm a well-known Czech poet," they of course laughed at him and threw his poems in the wastepaper bin. But then luckily one of the nurses was married to a Czech guy, and she went home and said, "Have you ever heard of a poet, Ivan Blatney?" And he said yes, he was a very well-known Czech poet, as he had said. He also has this wonderful but very natural poetics and practice of writing poems in 3 or 4 languages, not translating lines. He'd write 3 lines in Czech, a line in German, 2 lines in English, a line in Czech, half a line in French. So I'm going to read from 2 fragments of his, for obvious reasons. I cannot forget feeling one morning in Alexandra Park. I was completely connected with white pigeons. They were white as snow. He, the Lord of all creatures, created the drug called art. I saw him again after years in the reading room of the East End Library, where I went every week to read The Listener, to see whether my poem sent there was published. Of course, none of the poems he sent to The Listener were ever published. His collected works, by the way, now are 1,000 pages in Czech. Anyway, sorry, I'm going on a bit, aren't I? But, I just wanted to read those 2 poets in particular because of the stories they have, and because of, the context of where we're here and why Steve, or partly why Steve does what he does. Translation by Robert Hedden. I see you've learned. I like how you use few words and short sentences that drift in a fine rain down the page with light and air between. I see you've learnt to make a woodpile in the forest. Good to stack it tall so it can dry. Build one too long and low, the wood will just sit there and rot. And then one short poem from the Lithuanian, favourite poet of mine, Sigitas Geda. Every spring my soul gets dressed and leaves. So many times I tried to ask her, where to, she doesn't know where to. And if I've got time, and you will forbear with me, I'm going to read one or two poems of my own that relate to the exhibition. On the other side of the world there is a library. Wherever you are, it is always there, on the other side of the world. It is housed in a variety of buildings, but also always it is close to the sea, or the river, or the forest, or the road. There was one next the heat haze of an ocean, just by huge figures carved smooth and mask-eyed out of red granites. And there was another bounded by snowfields at the edge of a fire of red spruce. And inside each library was a golden book. And the island man had faith in this, in the existence of both the library and the book, of more than one library and more than one book, of a room filled by such books. He knew it was there, in the heat of the suns, in the clarity of cold moors, that it would come slanting down over his eyes, that it would shine there deliberately and quietly, unfeigning and with imperturbable strength. There was a bright lucidity about it. There was a peace in that library, a peace without dust and with the rich energies of achieving without oppression. The geometry of motion without frenetic activity. There was a wall without a door, and yet you could pass through into the library. Strange that architects seem not to know about these things. And it smelt of sweet corn and washing laid out on roofs to dry. The power of the powerless and the frail remnant. The centres of our world being at its edges. The calmness of the periphery. There is always a library on the other side of the world. Wherever you are, it is always there. The library of a culture as if yet unearthed. And when the horse jumped the ditch in the snow and ran across the field of solid ruts, sunlight shone through its belly. A horse translucent with sunlight, so that its veins were lit blue, red and silver against the world of its belly, and the whole horse seemed to be swimming as a fetus in the liquid of the air. And later, when the books in the basement were flooded and their pages were laid out on the roofs in the subsequent sun to dry, and the pages were carefully unpeeled from each other and laid out separately until the whole library was reconstituted, and that was the recovery of memory. And right through the times of the barbarities, of the fratricides, of the destruction of cities sacrificed to the vertical, of the herds of humans moving over the steppes, and when the great pit was dug, and the clay removed that was a bell-maker's clay, and the faggots and beams laid round, and the clay replaced, and the fires lit, and the bell dug out, whose sound said that memory was lost, and later when the snows were gone and the ruts melted, corn cobs were hung about the buildings of the farmstead, from under the solid core that is memory, from out of the mirage city there on memory's banks, and the blue crack right through the eye-hole of memory, and just beyond our speech, the dark and frothing roar of things. I've said far too much, so thank you very much. And please take a book.
Thank you so much, Stephen. You have never said enough, my friend. So now begins the collaborative part of the evening. Tonight is also a launch. There we go. There's the juicy mic sound that I was waiting for. It is a launch of this book, Flowers Won't Grow, by myself, sadly, and Karenjit Sandhu. So please welcome to perform with me, Karenjit Sandhu.
I went to the rooftops yesterday to watch people move into buildings, move out of them years, months, sometimes weeks later. I went to the rooftops yesterday. I went to the rooftops. It brings much comfort to see lights on so late past midnight. Just lights. I don't know who's inside. I don't care for that kind of information. It's just warming to know that the light burns because someone inside switched it on.
How they tell us what to think. Your last letter started brightly and then went dark. It was a great relief. Like those who lament the closure of buildings they never use. Or those types of poems that are skeletal, received by common wisdom as trying not to please friends but all people, despite them being noble characters excommunicado. I'm writing this trying not to reply to a rude email. My origins are with the brutes, with those who cannot spend the money they earned. Karen, why is everything so personal? I am sorry. Why am I asking you? Lights are left on everywhere. I find that to be like lots of puncture wounds, nicking arteries. It's like lights are on where trees should be.
Splinters. I don't think I told you, but a strange-looking man came into the neighbourhood newsletter on Monday. He did these roly-polies on Wednesday and on Saturdays, I think. No, maybe it was on a Monday. It was definitely the beginning of the week, and I like how week beginnings in the summer are gentle and kind to the body. There's energy in the space today. He rolls from left to right and through the centre. Please be kind and let him pass. Energy is like a flick of a switch on an old TV set that will fizzle and fizz as I watch old reruns. A brutish box he is. I've been writing with ink again in the hope for energy. We should all stand and perform roly-polies with him. It's courageous, a brave secret talent with the gravitas of firefighting.
I'm knackered. Where we lived. My strange-looking ad went up on my newsletter on MailChimp. I miss winter. This was all tied into how summers always are. Everyone is shirtless and attacking territory as though London were a game of Risk. We both live London. I've walked the length of Uxbridge Road as far as I could go. It's a special road. There's territorial army stuck in bunk beds. Lots of South Asian restaurants and people, of course. There's a turning with swans that are always being fed and are fat with that. It was definitely the beginning of the week I walked down it, and I love how week beginnings are gentler and kinder. I am looking for sloth. Why do we use the same gin, Karen?
Raise your flowers.
When we never, but twice, maybe three times.
Speak your lines.
Speak face to face.
Tell us about Sarah. It's not
The
loud
gym
enough.
has not the computers from which
Louder.
we
Who
write
is
these
Sarah?
letters. Energy.
What else do you have to say?
Energy
There's
is
a
like
question.
the thing running my
There's a
life,
question. Say
but
it.
not so.
There's a question. Say it.
With good humour and aplomb, as I wish to begin my
Hold up your
bag
flowers. What colour are they?
work. When I get the bag swinging and I use my
Together.
shoulder to slip
Orange.
it instead of hitting it.
Your flowers
Because
won't
it's a
grow.
commercial
Repeat
gym.
after me. Flowers won't grow.
And I'm a dickhead completely yet.
Flowers won't grow. I'm so happy with you tonight. The boiled sweets have just arrived. I picked them because I do not like sweeteners, and I remember reading online that if you do not like sugary stuff, then orange flowers are the best. Thank you for bringing all those flowers tonight and for your contributions, your statements. Do you remember that last letter you wrote to me, Steve? You mentioned the letters written between Oster and his wife. How funny. The audience is contributing today. They're part of the performance too. Their flowers shan't grow. Reimagining. We've lost our stride, but think we've clasped it back. Yours truly, Karen.
Thanks so much.
Hi everyone. Just a few moments ago, well, before the beginning, I told Susie I have two concerns about tonight. One is you won't understand the word I'm saying, especially when I read my poem. And second one is well, you see, it's already happening. So my introduction will be nonsense. So if so, forgive me. You've been warned. So just a few words for our joint work with Susie. On the way here, I really thought I'm very lucky to the people I meet in London. Starting with Stephen Watts, who introduced me to Peer, and then Stephen Fowler, thanks to whom we're here, and Susie, with whom it's been a great pleasure to collaborate. We've had a Zoom call in which Susie shared a very nice story, actually. It was about her visit to therapy farm.
A therapy farm. I'm not sure if there's such a thing as a therapy farm, but that's what it was called.
A therapy farm with students with learning disabilities, she said. And as a girl walked Susie through the farm, she explained, well, here are the llamas, here the chicken probably, and then, oh, this is just a field of bears, just a field of bears. We don't yet know if there is a field of bears somewhere in Kent. Sorry. But we did write tonight, or we did collaborate over the topic of meeting in a field of bears. We decided there'll be a meeting. There'll be bears, a snake, which I forgot to bring. Apologies once again. And we decided that we'll meet in text. So I'm very tempted to try the splits, but I think I won't be good enough. So I'll just stick to reading with my funny accent, and that will be following by Susie, who started first with a poem, and then I wrote in return as a response to her lovely poem, which was really inspirational. So that was really the easy part. I'll leave you with Susie.
Thank you so much, Kristina. So we agreed to meet in a field of bears. But how to reach across this linguistic constellation? Perhaps inside this pronoun, a collaboration past a muddy vehicle left at the edge of a field to rust. And we have our names, proper names, as a fluffy visitor's badge pinned to our pastel dungarees for the duration. And it doesn't have to be bears, we say, if we choose to meet without them. A field without bears is easy, right here, past the rust and through that gate, or a gap in the hedge, or no gate and no hedge, because it is an open field. But there must be grass, and perhaps a tree. A fallen tree split in half by lightning, a dead weight in this half-light. But it is the full weight of the sun, and not a dead tree, but 6 trees which make an orchard. Those wasps, though, after the cider apples. We can meet here in this field if we bring a snake, but not if it's an orchard. It can be awkward for a woman and a snake in an orchard. And as well as a trope, we'll need a conjunction. But Kristina and Susie or Kristina, yet Susie or Kristina, so Susie, and so we sit in the shade and watch it snow. Last year, when our minds were still green and we talked about poetry then too. We meet here in a snow-covered orchard, no wasps, as the fruit is still ripening. But when will the growling stop if we decide not to bring in the bears? And their growling doesn't even matter because they're wearing fur over their dungarees and a visitor's badge. But there must be grass and a tree. And at least we have agreed to talk about an orchard in the snow, although our pastel dungarees are a dead weight in this half-light. That was not on the map. And when will the growling stop if we are meeting in a field without bears for the duration of our meeting? And why are we wearing fur? But Kristina and Susie or Kristina, yet Susie or Kristina, so Susie, and so we sit in the snow and watch as bears in pastel fur meet in a field for the duration of us.
Warm lumps of mud bloom beneath our feet. Susie, my dear Susie. Small streams of rain run down the arteries of soil. Sorry, really, there had to be grass here. It had to be green and with at least 1 tree. That's what we agreed, to meet in the field of bears. But here we are, stepping quietly on the dry soil. The air smells of cold. We move in silence. Try not to wake the bears, not to scare the grass, which should grow after all. The field is empty, but we know they're here. Probably, at this very moment, you say, underground below us, curled up, the bears in half sleep are giving birth to their babies. And I agree. I can't believe this empty field to be just a field. Here, I can already feel how the bears, with warm tongues mowed out of nothing, the little brown bodies of their cubs. Susie, my dear Susie, the night will fall, and we will rest, I'm telling you. In the small hours, it is always easier. The questions hang unnecessary and fall like ripe apples, around which circle the wasps of our confessions, for lips from the past, for bodies and for dances, for music, for frozen fingers despite the warm weather, and moments in which the membrane of fear breaks, and we learn how to dance. As the night is thinning, dizzy with insomnia, we will tell ourselves, so what? Let the bears come out. Our footsteps have already grown big enough and ring with thousand little bells. They call the bears, and here they are emerging big and warm like hidden desires. Then comes the morning, and with it, farewell Susie, farewell field with soft green grass and a tree. We turn our big brown backs and leave.
Thank you.
Reading next will be Fabian Peake, and standing in for Vanni Bianconi, who has to self-isolate at the moment very generously, Simone Spoladore.
Good evening. I just want to say a very brief introduction to how Vanni, Bianconi and me sort of decided on what we're going to read tonight, which is very kindly read by Simone Spoladore. We had been setting off on a particular idea about Mexico because Vanni and I had been to Mexico, and that seemed to be some sort of link to start with. But unfortunately, Vanni is having to quarantine and has had to drop out of tonight. What we talked about other things, and one of the things that came up was that we both went to poetry courses run by the American poet Michael Donaghy. And Vanni happened to have a poem anyway written about Michael Donaghy called Exercises in Disappearing. And it's in 3 sections, will be read tonight, interspersed with and sort of dovetailed with 2 of my poems. One of them was written when I was doing the course with Michael Donaghy, and another one was written about something that, with reference to something that Michael had said in one of these classes, which was about how often the sort of accoutrements and belongings and clothing of people often is sort of much more poignant than the actual person when they have died, you know, a relative or a parent, something like that. And he had written a poem called The Overcoat, which was about his father, the death of his father, and the poem that I wrote a long time later was inspired by that poem. So what we're going to do is Simone is going to start reading Vanni's poem, and then it's in 3 sections, and I will fill in the gaps. So
Exercises in Disappearing, I think is what Vanni is doing now. And well, they choose to talk about Michael Donaghy because he was very good and put people together. One September, years ago, I went for a mock Erasmus, an unaccredited way to spend some studious months in London. shared a room with 3 girls from Caracas and happened to join Michael Donna's class. I am unsure of what it was that would switch on, then off, but in there we felt both, separate and one, like moths caught together on one's retina if a bulb flares and blows. After each session, on our way to the pub, all the cliches would fall back into their cast. The overacting actor, the very British, the fast Irish, a dreamy copywriter, the expat, a former built intimate with Hughes, and an inarticulate foreigner. After that semester of weekly metempsychosis, life itself made sure to keep increasing our doses. One is a woman who was a man. Others are drunk, are read, are published. I live inarticulate now. 2 are dead.
Staring at a bush. I have stared into that bush a long time this winter, one of many leafless on the heath. It's like this. A crowd of uncut walking sticks grows thick and upright in the sandy ground. Scrambled twigs fill the gaps between, like scribbles trapped in cold frames. A light zephyr whispers secrets through the rattling wood. Pungent, a scent of puma, imagined, wafts across to where I eyeball the inexplicable. Mist descends, laying droplets on algae-covered stems. Approaching, I draw aside cane tresses and peer through. I see the black humpbacked hangers left by the departed Americans. The base is still used for playing golf. Red-faced, I'm looking for answers, but the questions turn away, teasing.
"10 years from then and from them, I stand outside the bleak narrow classroom, as if by reprimand, and it seems all has yet to happen. In the empty room, dust hardly settles but drifts mid-air in a vacuum. Donaghy, the poet, will stand here like a steward on a plane, instructing us with poised gestures, utterly urbane, on how to act in the last minutes before death by flight. Pull, drag, breathe and turn. A dance he keeps learning last night. And I'm quite certain that the oxygen mouthpiece working as a tin can telephone would voice odes to siblings never met, never daughters, night trains of thoughts, bottles breaking fumbling through pages and names. His were exercises in turning white noise, hints on how to defy gravity through precise statics. Gravity wins. Now, I stand here, under a street lamp's bulb of glass, and guess that life itself is but homework for his class.
In the clothes, talking her melancholy brogue, gnarled, nobbled and shotten red, shoes speak with a cousin's lisp, not his dead father, or pulled into the soul of tweed, the weave, but what of the Chinese carpet? Yet he's not there from Walks in Paradise, and nobody's sealed up in its fibres. He is deep in the metal wardrobe, yet he's not there, and aunt is not in the room, fitted. He is deep in the metal, talking her melancholy brogue, into the soul of tweed, dry rotten tongues, laced up, a sparky great uncle, lampstands and bomber jackets, trousers, the piano, a lemon squeezer. And aunt's not in the room, fitted, her waving tresses straining to get out of the jacket, conceals her from walks in paradise, gnarled, nobbled, and shotten into her flowered frock, its lace bodice, a sparky great uncle in its sycamore shaft. And the walking stick compresses. He talked about the coat, lampstands in its sycamore shaft. The family glasses glare into her flowered frock, its lace bodice, the walking stick, dry rotten tongues, laced up glasses, glare inside them all. A father, a mother, compresses, talked about the coat, swallow the family with impunity. And bomber jackets, swallow, but what of the Chinese carpet? The weave of the jacket conceals nobody sealed up in its fibres. Red shoes whisper with a cousin's lisp. Not his dead father. Trousers, the piano, a lemon squeezer. Inside them all, a father, a mother, straining to get out, or pulled he.
I read that Sardinians aped Latin as monks imitate people. And while writing this in the morning cold, I feel like I am banging on a flint. My lines, cast in the mood of other verse, or smelt in the draught from a back door left ajar by those who leave us at an early age. With an apish shiver in the premature air, I hit a spot that's found when lost. The caesura. In the books of whole families of poets now, I find lines resembling Donnery's, voices shaking on the edge of his departure, or pages still moist. And I feel a little less out there if, in the chrome of winter, I write to a dead man in an unfamiliar city, a foreign language, its brisk air.
Well done. That's it, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Well done.
And reading next to complete our evening, a round of applause please for Vik Shirley and Clover Peake.
So me and Vik, we have not met before, and we decided to, we were corresponding by email, and we decided to collaborate by looking at each other's work, and I chose some words or themes that I felt were in her work, and she did the same for me. So then I gave her the words, and she wrote work on those words, and vice versa, and then we swapped, if that makes sense. So the first poem is, so we're going to alternate between the words we gave each other. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the first one was distraction. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yes.
So this one's for Kitch. Sorry, I wasn't listening. Surfaces are sexy. You can fuck on them, snort lines off them. Thinking is for those lacking in a more pleasurable agenda. Stop making me put effort in. I'm here to be banged, not challenged. Anyway, I don't have time for the latter. I'm doing my hair, etc. For the former, I'll drop everything. I did feel something once, I promise. You have my word, ha ha ha. Love me, I'm so adorable, if cold, dead eyes are your kink. Make me feel good now. I'm so happy that everyone likes me because they don't know me. Stop trying to make me mean something. I promise you, you are wasting your time. Although wasting time is certainly something I could get behind. I was thinking how you could not talk and just sit there and look pretty while I pet you, dress you up like one of those little toys, a souvenir in Don Don Donkey. I don't care if you're made out of plastic. I am too. You're so cute. Let's be vacuous together.
Okay. Then we worked on poems where the theme was, or the title was, distraction. And this is my one. Distraction, resigned plea. I noticed her gesture. She smoothly flicks her arm, hand open, forearm up, which she gently swings to the side of her body, tilting her head. She asks something, asked before. This time she puts it better, hoping for favour.
Congratulations, you made it into my daydreams. And now you are sucking all the sense out of me, just the way I like it. Strictly erotic. And sense was dubious anyway, although I've got other attributes. Not sure when I started writing such filthy poems, but it sure does come natural. How is anyone supposed to concentrate on anything when they haven't had sex since January? Too much information? Asking for a friend. I have a good feeling this will be rectified soon. I'm hoping by the time I read this poem in public. So don't feel bad unless feeling bad adds to it. Anyway, what was I saying? Something about economics, voodoo economics. I was just musing on your measurements, that cute picture of you online. You look so dreamy in yellow. Look, I have deadlines. I'm very important. Although if I was a little more relaxed, pretty sure I'd be unstoppable. Want to play a part in creating a monster? You are hot guy number 1. No, it's okay. You don't need to audition. The role is yours.
And then we moved on to the theme of mirrors or reflection. This is Tinkerbell. Wrist twisting, your watch face in the sunlight. The baby, jaundiced, is being healed by a scorching pain. It's a weekend game, born out of limits. The gold spot dances on the ceiling, on the walls, and into our elated eyes.
Match point. Me and the reflected me had the best time over lockdown. You must bring your reflected you. When you come and stay, we can have a party, double date. Ooh, doubles. I'll whip out my tiny white vintage Slazenger tennis dress, or should I say dig out? We'll get to the whips later, or maybe not really my bag. Oh, but whipped cream, sure. Every poem I write that isn't surreal turns back to sex. This is just a fact, not a line of poetry. Our reflected selves can gossip about us when we're not looking, or in the other room when we're deep in convo about modernism or big train. When I'm trying to persuade you to finish your book and publish it, which may be an ongoing argument until the point where I win, and I finally make you see that writing books is sexier than not writing books. Our reflected selves will tell each other what we like, what we do when it's only us and them in the room. They will simultaneously disgust and turn on the other. Is there a difference? With explicit descriptions.
And then this theme was nightclubs. Nosce te ipsum. The club flyers are on all the car windscreens. An ignored message. You didn't want to say her name. It wasn't about the word. Something you had to see. A flower, tedious, to your golden face. Looking in, then in again. It's not love you want, just the drinking in of dark water, a reflection, knowing less to yourself. The pool drew you in, to your own longing, and you were perfected, gone. Although the song is still sung, different rhythm, different words, but the same cry.
Today's hedonist menu. I'm just reading on Wikipedia that quaaludes were the thing in disco club culture in the 1970s. Based on the depiction in Wolf of Wall Street, I'd like to give them a go. Might be better if younger and more beautiful, though. Another reason to yearn for time travel or to yearn for anything. It's what we do. I'm still bitter about the absence of Benzedrine in my life right now. I feel cheated. Should W.H. Auden be disqualified from poetry for taking performance-enhancing drugs? Literally the Lance Armstrong of literature. The Chemical Life, I demand that prescription. Is it me or was a young Auden hot? Just checked online and there's no evidence of him in a nightclub indulging in rampant promiscuity and public sex. How boring. No one is promiscuous these days. Aren't we all supposed to be fucking each other or something? Was going to make a suggestion here but thought it might get me in trouble. So going to end with a disco ball in my new flat.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming. We're all pretty much underwater, so no puff. Just a big thank you to the folk at Peer Gallery for being so supportive and a pleasure to work with. Isabel, Rosa, Ingrid, and to Hoxton Trust Garden and Stephen Watts. A round of applause for those people at the end. Have a lovely evening.